So the Trump administration has been making moves within this last year that watchdog groups say are going to chill or weaken whistleblower protections, especially at the federal level. So, what this would essentially mean is people are more afraid to step forward as whistleblowers, and if they do, there are fewer protections for them, which essentially means that if and when Donald Trump breaks the law, or one of his sycophants do, there's going to be no one to tell you about it. And that seems to be the goal. So, first of all, he's made a number of firings of key watchdogs, the OSC, and MSPB heads. So, Trump summarily removed Hampton Dellinger, head of the Office of Special Counsel, the OSC, which investigates whistleblower retaliation, and Kathy Harris, chair of the Merit Systems Protection Board, the MSPB, which adjudicates whistleblower cases, even though both of those people in their positions should have had statutory for cause protections, which means that they could only be fired for misconduct, serious misconduct. He fired them anyway. That was earlier in the year. Also, earlier in the year, in March 20th of 2025, presidential memorandum strengthening the suitability and fitness of the federal workforce shifted broad authority over suitability determinations to the Office of Personnel Management, a change employment lawyers say puts deeper dents in federal employee protections and increases the risk of retaliatory harassment against employees who blow the whistle. Whistleblower specialists argue that under this new regime, employees who report misconduct may face more avenues for discipline or removal under vague suitability grounds, raising the cost and risk of whistleblowing. A late 2025 proposed rule was reported as stripping whistleblower and due process safeguards from large categories of federal employees, which critics warn that the U.S. government would be taking away whistleblower protections from the people who are likely to be the best positioned to identify misconduct. Shocking. Advocacy organizations such as Whistleblower Aid have publicly fired back at this rule, characterizing it as an effort to silence whistleblowers and urging Congress and courts to block this implementation. Pressure on enforcement mechanisms and anti corruption laws has upped as well. A February 10th, 2025 executive order paused enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the FCPA, for 180 days with some exceptions, while whistleblower lawyers say weakens incentives and pathways for reporting corporate bribery and corruption tied to U.S. companies. Shifts in Department of Justice priorities and conservative judicial interpretations are also described as putting False Claims Act whistleblower cases under pressure, potentially narrowing the practical impact of these protections even if the statutes remain on the books. Now, there have been some attempts to counteract these efforts. New whistleblower protection bills, for instance. In parallel, bipartisan bills have been introduced to expand protections, including legislation to close loopholes for federal contractors and to give FBI employees access to MSPB review for retaliation claims. These efforts show substantial pushback on Capitol Hill against perceived attempts to erode safeguards, even as executive branch rules and personnel moves in the opposite direction. Senate Democrats have also launched a whistleblower portal for federal employees to report abuses of power and threats to public safety, explicitly invoking existing statutory protections under the Whistleblower Protection Act. You heard them do this in the Epstein case. They specifically made an appeal to members of the FBI or DOJ who may have information about illegal actions or suspect actions that have been taking place at the FBI or DOJ in regards to the Epstein files. But the bottom line is the core statutes like the Whistleblower Protection Act and the False Claims Act remain formally in place, but the Trump administration has removed or sought to remove independent officials who protect whistleblowers, advanced rules that make it easier to sideline or fire federal workers, and reoriented enforcement in ways critics say deter or mute whistleblowing. Advocates and several members of Congress explicitly frame these moves as attempts, direct or indirect, to strip or hollow out practical protections for whistleblowers, especially inside the federal government. Because the most transparent regime in history doesn't want you to know what they're doing behind the scenes.